I hid my witch powers for 8 years to keep my throne, until my hunter guard discovered the truth. Please subscribe to this channel and activate notifications so you don't miss any episodes of this incredible story. Use headphones for an immersive experience. For 8 years, I wore 2 crowns, one of gold that everyone could see, and one of silver moonlight that would get me burned alive. The first crown sat heavy on my copper-red hair during council meetings, during public ceremonies, during every moment I played the role of Vivian Silverdale, Widow Queen of Argentvale, dutiful ruler, perfect political chess piece. That crown everyone could see. That crown they expected, demanded, worshipped even. But the second crown, the one woven from starlight and ancient magic, the one that made my skin glow silver and my eyes blaze with power, passed down through generations of women who'd learned to hide or die, that crown would get me tied to a stake and burned alive while my subjects cheered. I learned to wear both without anyone noticing the weight. Tonight, like every night for the past 8 years, I stood in my private chambers with all the doors locked, all the servants dismissed, all the precautions taken, and I let myself breathe. The grandfather clock in the corner had just chimed midnight, and moonlight poured through my windows like liquid silver, calling to the power buried deep in my bones. I could feel it rising. That ancient magic my mother passed to me with her dying breath, the same magic that got her burned when I was 17, the same magic I'd hidden from my late husband, from the council, from every single person in this godforsaken kingdom that still thought burning women solved their problems. I closed my eyes and let the words rise from somewhere deep in my chest, syllables in a language dead for 1,000 years. Sounds that felt like coming home after a lifetime of exile. The magic answered immediately, eagerly, like a caged wolf finally set free. My feet lifted off the floor, just an inch, then 2, then 3, until I was floating in the center of my chamber, copper-red hair swirling around my face in a wind that existed only in the space between worlds. Silver light poured from my fingertips, tracing patterns in the air, ancient runes that would protect the castle walls, strengthen the wards I'd woven into every stone, keep my people safe from threats they'd never even know existed. This was the only hour I had, midnight to 1, when the moon was highest and my power sang strongest, when I could stop pretending to be just a queen and remember I was also a witch. The rest of the time, I shoved it down so deep I could almost forget the taste of magic on my tongue, almost forget the way my mother screamed as the flames took her, almost forget that I was one accusation away from the same fate. The power felt stronger tonight, wilder. It thrashed inside me like something alive, like something warning me that danger was coming, that the careful balance I'd maintained for 8 years was about to shatter. I tried to focus, to channel the energy into the protective spells, but my concentration kept fracturing. Something was wrong. The air tasted electric, charged with the kind of tension that came right before lightning struck. My magic flared suddenly, violently, sending a shockwave of silver light exploding outward. The warning came half a second too late. The chamber doors burst open. I saw him in the doorway, Captain Theron Grayson, captain of my guard, the man I'd been carefully not looking at for 8 years, the man whose scent of pine and steel and something indefinably him made my wolf pace restlessly inside my chest every time he stood too close. He was frozen, storm-gray eyes wide with shock, hand already moving toward the sword at his hip, taking in the impossible sight of his queen floating 3 feet off the ground, with silver light pouring from her hands like water, ancient words falling from her lips like poetry and power and damnation all combined. Time stopped. The magic dropped me instantly, and I stumbled, catching myself against my desk hard enough that the impact jarred up my arms. Every protective instinct my mother ever taught me screamed at once. Run, fight, disappear into the night, shift into wolf form and tear out his throat before he could speak a single word. Queens don't run, I told myself desperately, even as my heart hammered so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Queens face their executioners with dignity, but I wasn't ready to die. Not tonight. Not ever. Theron's hand closed around his sword hilt, and something inside me shattered. After 8 years of stolen glances across the throne room, of his steady presence at my side during every council meeting, of the way his voice went soft when he spoke to me, of the dreams I'd never admitted having where those battle-scarred hands touched me the way no one ever had. This was how it ended. He'd call the guards. They'd drag me to the pyre by dawn. The council would probably throw a celebration. I reached for my magic, the spell that erased memories already forming on my tongue. I'd used it twice before, on servants who'd seen too much, who'd walked in at the wrong moment. Simple magic, Clean magic. Merciful, even. He'd forget he ever came here. He'd forget the floating, the silver light, the ancient words. He'd forget everything, and I'd be safe for another night, another year, however long I could keep running. The words spilled out in that dead language, and silver light enveloped his head, seeping toward his temples like smoke. I poured everything I had into it, desperate, terrified, already mourning the loss of him, even though he'd never really been mine to lose. Nothing happened. The spell hit something and scattered like water against stone. Theron blinked, touched the leather cord at his neck, and pulled out a small amulet I'd never noticed before, a wolf's head carved from blessed oak, inscribed with protective runes that glowed faintly in the moonlight, the kind of runes witch hunters used, the kind that made my skin crawl just looking at them. My mother gave this to me when I was 12, he said quietly, and his voice was rough, shaken, but not with revulsion, with something that looked dangerously like wonder. Before she died, she made me swear I'd never take it off. She said it would protect me from enchantments. The irony would have been funny if I wasn't so terrified I could taste copper in my mouth. A witch hunter's son had discovered my secret, and the very protection meant to destroy my kind was now preventing me from protecting myself. I was trapped, cornered. One word from him, and I was dead. Instead of calling for the guards, Theron closed the door behind him, locked it with a deliberate click that echoed through the chamber like a death knell, and then, impossibly, he dropped to one knee. "Your Majesty," he said, and his storm-gray eyes met mine without flinching, without fear, without the disgust I'd expected. "Your secret is safe with me." I didn't believe him, couldn't believe him. My mother had trusted someone once, and she'd burned for it. Trust was a luxury witches couldn't afford, especially not witch queens who wore crowns and made enemies just by breathing. "Why are you here?" The question came out steadier than I felt, cold and regal. Every inch the queen, even though my hands were shaking, and my magic was still crackling under my skin, begging me to run. He rose slowly, carefully, like approaching a spooked horse. "The council is planning a coup." The words hit like a physical blow. I'd known the council hated me. Half of them had wanted my husband's younger brother to inherit instead of letting a woman rule. But a coup meant execution, not just dethronement. It meant they were done pretending to respect my authority. "I overheard them tonight," Theron continued, taking another step closer. "In the West Tower. They thought all the guards had been dismissed, so they spoke freely. Lord Castellan, Lord Rothmore, Lady Ashbourne, half your trusted advisors, Your Majesty. They're planning to overthrow you, but they're not planning exile or imprisonment." He paused, and something in his expression made my blood run cold. "They're going to burn you as a witch." The floor tilted under my feet. "They don't have proof," I said, but my mouth had gone dry. "They can't possibly know. They don't know." Theron's voice was hard now, angry, "but they're planning to manufacture evidence. Plant witch marks on your body while you sleep. Pay false witnesses to testify they've seen you practicing dark magic. Lord Castellan already has the pyre being built in the town square. He's calling it routine maintenance." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the roaring in my ears. 8 years of careful hiding, of never making a mistake, of watching my mother burn and swearing I'd never let it happen to me. And it was all about to end anyway, because power-hungry nobles wanted my throne. Theron took another step, and suddenly there was nowhere to retreat. I could smell him now, pine from the forests where he trained the guards, steel from the sword he wore like a second skin, and underneath it all something warm and alive and uniquely him that made my wolf wake up and pay attention in ways it never had before. I'd been so careful never to stand too close, never to let myself notice the way his hands moved, or the sound of his laugh, or the way his presence made me feel less alone. But now, there was nothing between us but a few feet of moonlight and 8 years of loneliness I'd pretended didn't exist. "I have a proposition," he said, and his voice had dropped to something low and intimate that sent shivers down my spine. "Let me be your informant. I oversee security for the council chambers. I hear things, see things, go places you can't without raising suspicion. I can warn you before they move, give you time to prepare, help you stop them." "Why?" The question tore out of me before I could stop it, raw and desperate. "Why would you help me? Your mother was a witch hunter. Your entire family. They killed people like me. They probably killed people I knew. Why would you risk everything to protect a witch?" My mother was a witch hunter until she fell in love with my father. His smile was sad, distant, like he was seeing ghosts I couldn't. He was a mage from the southern covens. She chose him over her family, her duty, everything she'd been raised to believe. They gave me this amulet not to hunt witches, but to protect me from those who would use magic to hurt me. They taught me there's a difference between protection and persecution. He took another step, close enough now that I could see the silver scar above his eyebrow, the one he'd gotten taking an arrow meant for me 3 years ago. Close enough that the scent of him was overwhelming, intoxicating, dangerous. I don't care what you are, Your Majesty. I care that you're the best ruler this kingdom has had in 2 centuries. I care that you lowered taxes on farmers when the council wanted to raise them. I care that you built schools in every village, that you banned the practice of burning women on accusations alone, that you fought for justice every single day since you took the throne. And I care that if those vipers succeed, Argentvale will fall into darkness. His storm-gray eyes held mine, and I saw something in them that terrified me more than the coup, more than the pyre, more than anything. I saw belief, faith, something dangerously close to devotion. Your secret is safe with me, he said quietly. But those counselors planning to overthrow you, they're not planning to exile you. They're planning to burn you. Let me help you stop them. I should have said no, should have banished him from my chambers, found another way to protect myself, maintained the carefully constructed walls that had kept me alive and alone for 8 years. But when Theron extended his hand, calloused from sword work, scarred from 100 battles, steady and sure, offering alliance, trust, something my lonely heart had craved since the moment I married for political necessity rather than love, I couldn't make myself refuse. I took his hand. The world exploded. Heat flooded through me, starting at the point where our palms touched and racing through my entire body like wildfire. Connection slammed into me with the force of a physical blow, so profound and overwhelming that it stole the breath from my lungs. Recognition howled through every cell in my body. This, finally this. And my wolf surged forward with a cry of pure joy that I barely managed to keep silent. I saw the exact moment Theron's wolf answered, his eyes flashing golden for just a heartbeat, his grip on my hand tightening convulsively until I felt the imprint of every finger. No, this couldn't be happening. Not now, not him, but I could feel it now, clear as day, undeniable as gravity, the mate bond stretching between us like a silver thread, pulsing with warmth and rightness, and everything I'd convinced myself I'd never have. An alpha queen and a beta guard. A witch, and the son of hunters. Impossible in every way that mattered. No, I whispered, trying to pull away, but my body wouldn't obey. It wanted to move closer, to press against him, to claim what destiny had apparently decided was mine. No, this can't. How long have you known? Theron's voice was ragged, his breathing harsh like he'd just run a mile. I didn't. The confession felt ripped from somewhere deep in my chest. I thought it was just attraction. Something I had to ignore because you were my guard, and I was the queen, and it was impossible. I didn't know it was this. I've known for 3 years. The admission was quiet, devastating. The day you personally tended to my wounds after the border skirmish. Your scent, your touch. My wolf claimed you instantly, but you were the queen, and I was nobody, just another guard. I thought I was going mad. 3 years. He'd been living with this bond, this pull, this constant ache for 3 years, standing at my side during every council meeting, protecting me during every public appearance, wanting me the way I'd secretly wanted him, and never said a word, never pushed, never demanded, never made it my problem to solve. We can't, I said, even as my traitorous body swayed toward him like a flower toward sunlight. Even without the witch issue, the council would never accept it. An alpha queen taking a beta mate? They'd call it an abomination. They'd use it as more evidence that I'm unfit to rule. Then we'll be careful. Theron lifted my hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to my knuckles that sent electricity racing up my arm and straight to my chest, where the mate bond thrummed like a second heartbeat. Let me protect you in secret. Let me be your eyes and ears in the places you can't go. And when we've stopped the coup, when you're safe, his voice dropped to something raw and hungry and full of promise. Then we'll figure out the rest. It was a terrible plan. A dangerous plan. A plan that could get us both killed. Me burned at the stake for witchcraft, him executed for treason, or corrupting the queen, or any of a dozen charges the council could invent. But the mate bond was singing between us now, and I could feel his determination, his loyalty, his absolute certainty that he would protect me, or die trying. And God help me. I was so tired of being alone. I nodded. The smile that broke across Theron's face was like sunrise after a long night, warm and brilliant and full of relief. He pressed another kiss to my hand, then stepped back reluctantly, putting proper distance between us, even though the mate bond screamed in protest. I should go, he said quietly, before someone notices I'm here. But tomorrow, after the morning council meeting, find a reason to visit the library. I'll meet you there with everything I know about their plans. I nodded again, not trusting my voice. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the lock. Your Majesty, Vivian, he said, and the sound of my name in his voice made something in my chest ache. You're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, whatever they throw at us, you're not alone. Then he was gone, slipping out into the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost, leaving me standing in my chamber with moonlight pooling at my feet and the taste of hope on my tongue for the first time in 8 years. I touched my lips where the mate bond thrummed strongest, where I could still feel the phantom pressure of his kiss against my hand, and realized I'd just made the most reckless decision of my life. I'd been so careful for so long, trusting no one, needing no one, keeping everyone at arm's length, because attachment meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant death. Now my heart and my crown both belonged to a man who could destroy me with a single word, or save me from the monsters wearing noble faces. Outside my window, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, rolling in from the north like an omen. The moon disappeared behind them, plunging my chamber into darkness. But for the first time in 8 years, since the night they burned my mother, since the day I married a man I didn't love for a crown I didn't want, since I learned that being a witch queen meant being alone forever, Vivian Silverdale allowed herself something more dangerous than magic, more forbidden than love, more reckless than hope. I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could have both crowns and keep my head. The mate bond was supposed to make things simpler. One person, one destiny, one undeniable truth. Instead, it made everything impossible. 5 days after Theron discovered my secret, I sat on my throne trying to look like a queen, while internally I was burning alive. Lord Castellan droned on about grain taxes and trade tariffs, his voice like gravel scraping against my last nerve, and I couldn't focus on a single word, because every cell in my body was screaming awareness of the man standing at his usual post by the doorway. Theron's face was carefully blank, that perfect guard's mask he'd perfected over the years, but I could feel him now. The mate bond hummed between us like a plucked string, vibrating with his presence, his emotions, his barely contained desire to cross the room and touch me the way we both desperately wanted. It was torture, sweet, exquisite, maddening torture. What Theron had told me that first night had been proven true over and over in the days since. He'd been feeding me information constantly, meetings I wasn't told about, documents that mysteriously disappeared from my desk before I could review them, whispered conversations he overheard about my supposed instability and questionable decisions. The coup was building momentum like a storm gathering on the horizon, and I was walking a razor's edge between revealing I knew too much or acting too late to stop it. Your Majesty seems distracted today. Lady Ashbourne's voice cut through my thoughts like a blade wrapped in silk. She was watching me with those cold blue eyes, the kind that belonged on a snake rather than a woman, and I felt my wolf snarl at the implied criticism. I forced my lips into a calm smile, channeling every ounce of royal composure I'd learned in 8 years of playing this game, merely contemplating the fascinating complexities of agricultural policy. Lady Ashbourne, please, do continue. I caught Theron's reflection in the polished shield hanging on the wall behind Castellan. Just for a fraction of a second, his mouth twitched, almost a smile. The bond pulsed with warmth, his amusement bleeding through before he locked it down again, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling myself. This was going to kill me. Not the coup, not the council's treachery, but this constant awareness of him, this need to touch and be touched that I had to suppress every single moment we were in public. 5 days of stolen glances, of hands carefully not brushing when he opened doors for me, of conversations that meant one thing to everyone listening, and something entirely different to us. 5 days of wanting him so badly I could taste it, and having to pretend he was just another guard. The meeting dragged on for another excruciating hour before Castellan finally ran out of numbers to bore us with. The councillors filed out one by one, all honeyed words and poisonous intentions hidden behind courtly manners, and Theron began to follow them like he always did. Captain Grayson, A moment. My voice stopped him at the threshold. He turned, something flashing in those storm-gray eyes before his expression went carefully neutral. "Your Majesty?" The door clicked shut behind the last counselor. We were alone. Professional. Proper. I managed exactly 3 heartbeats of restraint before I crossed the space between us and pulled him down into a kiss that had been building for 5 agonizing days. He made a sound low in his throat, half surprise and half relief, and then his arms came around me, and he was kissing me back with the kind of desperate hunger that matched my own. The mate bond sang between us, flooding me with sensation. His taste, his scent, his hands on my waist pulling me closer, the solid warmth of his body against mine after days of carefully maintained distance. Magic crackled under my skin, responding to the bond, to him, silver light spilling from my fingertips, where they gripped his shoulders. "We can't do this here," he breathed against my mouth, but he didn't pull away. His hands slid at my back, holding me tighter, contradicting his words with action. I know. I kissed him again anyway, deeper, claiming, pouring 5 days of frustrated longing into it. I know, but I know. His forehead pressed against mine, both of us breathing hard. I feel it too. Every second in that room, standing there watching you, not being able to touch you. It's killing me. The vulnerability in his voice undid something in my chest. I cupped his face, thumb tracing the line of his jaw, feeling the rough stubble there. "Tonight," I whispered. "Meet me in the East Gardens at midnight. There's a place my mother used to go, protected by wards. We'll be safe there." His eyes searched mine. "Are you sure?" "I'm not sure about anything except that I need more than stolen kisses in throne rooms." I smiled, trying for lightness even though my heart was hammering. "Besides, you owe me information about what Castellan's planning. Might as well share it somewhere we can actually breathe." He caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm that sent shivers racing up my arm. "Midnight, then. My queen." The way he said it, "my queen," made it sound like a promise, like a vow, like everything I'd never let myself hope for. The hours until midnight crawled by like centuries. I sat through dinner with the remaining counselors, smiling and nodding while they discussed matters I could barely focus on, all while counting down the minutes until I could escape. When I finally dismissed my ladies-in-waiting and locked my chamber doors, claiming exhaustion, the relief was almost painful. I changed out of my formal gown into something simpler, darker, easier to move in, pulled a cloak over my copper hair to blend into shadows, slipped out through the hidden passages my mother had shown me years ago, the ones that led through the castle walls like secret veins. The East Gardens were overgrown and forgotten, abandoned after my mother's death because no one else could tend to the magical plants that grew there. I stepped through the iron gate and immediately felt the wards recognize my blood, welcoming me home. The air here was different, cleaner, charged with old magic, smelling of night-blooming flowers and earth and power. Theron was already waiting. He stood in the center of the garden, moonlight turning his dark hair silver, and he was holding something in his hands. As I got closer, I saw what it was, and my breath caught. Moonflowers, a whole bouquet of them, their luminescent white petals glowing softly in the darkness. The rare, night-blooming flowers that only grew where magic had been practiced for generations, where witch blood had soaked into the soil and transformed it into something other. "Where did you find these?" My voice came out softer than I meant it to, touched by wonder. "The abandoned wing of the castle." He offered them to me with a small, almost shy smile that I'd never seen on his face before. "I noticed you looking at them during patrols, the way your eyes would linger, like you were remembering something. So I transplanted a few here, over the past month. Thought you might like having them close." Over the past month, before he even knew about my magic, before the mate bond snapped into place, he'd been paying attention to what made me smile, had been quietly, carefully courting me without me even realizing it. I took the flowers with shaking hands, bringing them to my nose. They smelled like moonlight and memory, like every night I'd spent with my mother in gardens like this one, learning magic and dreaming of a future where I wouldn't have to hide. "You're courting me with magical flowers," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you realize how dangerous that is? Everything about us is dangerous." He stepped closer, tucking one of the luminescent blooms behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my skin. "Might as well make it beautiful too." The words hit something deep in my chest. For 8 years I'd been so focused on survival, on hiding, on just getting through each day without being discovered. I'd forgotten that life could be beautiful, that love could be something other than a political strategy or a calculated risk. Theron took my hand and led me deeper into the garden, to where the grass grew soft and thick, where ancient roses climbed over crumbling stone benches, and the moonlight filtered through leaves overhead like silver lace. We sat together, close enough that our shoulders touched, and for the first time since the mate bond clicked into place, we could just be. "Tell me about them," I said quietly. "Your parents, the witch hunter and the mage." He was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. My mother was 23 when she met my father, already one of the best hunters in her family's line, already responsible for many deaths. His voice went heavy there, and I squeezed his hand, letting him know I understood. She was tracking a rogue mage who'd been accused of cursing a village's water supply, followed him for weeks. When she finally cornered him, he didn't fight, just asked if he could explain. What had he really done? Purified the water. The village had been dying of some disease, and he'd used magic to clean the wells, but the local lord wanted him dead anyway, because he'd refused to use his magic for the lord's profit. Theron's smile was sad. My mother let him go. Her family disowned her when they found out. She married him 3 months later. I could picture it. A woman raised to hate magic, taught that witches and mages were evil, having her entire worldview shattered by one act of kindness, choosing love over everything she'd been raised to believe. She never regretted it, Theron continued, not even when times were hard, when they were poor, when her family refused to acknowledge my existence. She'd tell me that real strength wasn't about following orders blindly. It was about knowing when the orders were wrong, and having the courage to disobey. He turned to look at me, storm-gray eyes intense in the moonlight. "That's what I see when I look at you, Vivienne. Someone who had every reason to become cruel, to use her power to dominate and control the way the council does. But instead, you've spent 8 years trying to make things better, building schools, lowering taxes, fighting for justice, even when it would have been easier to just take what you wanted. No one had ever seen me like that before. King Aldrich had valued me for my political connections, my bloodline, my ability to play the royal game. The council tolerated me because they thought they could control me. But Theron looked at me and saw the queen I'd been trying to become, the woman who wanted to be worthy of the crown she wore. "Kiss me," I whispered, because I needed to feel this, needed to know it was real. He did, and this kiss was different from the desperate one in the throne room. This was slow, thorough, a claiming that made my magic sing beneath my skin. Silver light spilled from my fingertips without my conscious control, wrapping around us both like a blessing, and Theron didn't flinch. He pulled me closer instead, one hand threading through my copper hair, the other splayed across my lower back, kissing me deeper until I couldn't tell where I ended, and he began. We stayed like that for hours, lying on the soft grass beneath the moonlight, not making love yet, both too cautious, too aware of consequences, but touching, talking, learning each other in ways stolen moments during the day never allowed. He told me about growing up always feeling like he belonged nowhere, too magical for the normal world, too wolf for the witch covens. I told him about my wedding night, how terrified I'd been that Aldrich would discover what I was, how lonely the crown became when I couldn't trust anyone with my true self. I used to dream about just disappearing, I confessed against his shoulder, taking off the crown, walking away from all of it, becoming someone else somewhere far away where no one knew me. "Don't." The word came out fierce, almost harsh. He pulled me closer, arms tightening around me. "Don't leave. This kingdom needs you. I need you." The mate bond flared between us, and I felt his need as if it were my own. Not just physical desire, but something deeper, something that had nothing to do with crowns or duty. He needed my strength, my fire, the way I fought for justice even when it cost me. He needed me the way I needed him, completely, terrifyingly, irrevocably. "I won't," I promised. "Not anymore." We kissed again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. Magic and mate bond and pure human need tangled together until I couldn't separate them, until all I knew was the taste of him, the feel of his hands on my skin, the way he whispered my name like it was sacred. But the moment shattered when Theron suddenly went rigid. "Someone's coming," he breathed, and his hand moved to the sword he'd belted on before leaving his quarters. We separated instantly, me smoothing my dress while Theron positioned himself between me and the garden entrance, every line of his body tense and ready to fight. The wards should have warned me, should have screamed an alert the moment anyone without witch blood tried to enter. but I felt nothing, which meant whoever was coming had magic of their own. Lord Rothmore stepped through the garden gate as if the wards didn't even exist. My blood turned to ice. That was impossible. The wards had been here for 3 generations, powered by my bloodline, designed specifically to keep out anyone who wasn't family or explicitly invited. No one without witch blood should be able to pass through them unless— Clever spell work, Rothmore said casually, examining the moonflowers with the detached interest of a scholar. But not as clever as you think, Your Majesty. Did you really believe you were the only one with magical blood in this kingdom? The world tilted sideways. Rothmore was a mage on my council, planning a coup against me, and I'd never known, had never sensed his magic, never felt anything except the cold ambition I'd assumed was purely political. Surprised. He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that showed too many teeth. The Rothmore line has carried magical ability for 6 generations. Unlike you, we were wise enough to hide it properly. No midnight rituals in unlocked chambers. No leaving traces of power everywhere we go. We learned from watching people like your mother burn. We learned to be smarter. Theron moved to stand directly between us, hand on his sword hilt. Step away from the queen, Rothmore. The guard dog protects his mistress. How touching. Rothmore's eyes gleamed with malicious amusement. Tell me, Captain, did she enchant you? Is that why you've been so loyal, so devoted? Or did you fall for her all on your own? I'm not enchanted. Theron's voice was cold as winter steel. The amulet protects you from compulsion spells only, not from the mate bond. Rothmore's smile widened as he watched my face go white. Yes, I know about that too. We've been watching you both very carefully. Those secret meetings, those longing looks across the throne room. You've been so careful, and yet so obvious to anyone who knew what to look for. My mind raced. If Rothmore knew, then Castellan probably knew. Lady Ashbourne, how many others? How long had they been watching us play at secrecy while they saw through every lie? What do you want, Rothmore? I found my voice, forcing it to stay steady even though my heart was hammering hard enough to crack ribs. Simple. He spread his hands as if offering something reasonable. Abdicate. Leave Argentvale tonight. Take your wolf lover with you, and we'll let you both live. Go somewhere far away and be happy together. Refuse, and we'll expose you as the witch you are. By tomorrow morning you'll be ash, and the captain will be executed for consorting with evil. It was the smart choice, the safe choice. Run, survive, live in hiding, but at least live together. We could go south to the witch covens, or north to the wild territories, or across the sea to lands where magic wasn't feared. We could have a life, build something real, be together without always looking over our shoulders. I felt Theron waiting for my decision through the mate bond, ready to follow whatever I chose, ready to run with me if I asked, to give up everything, his honor, his duty, his entire life, because I was his mate, and that mattered more than anything, which was exactly why I couldn't do it. No, I said quietly, this is my kingdom. These are my people. You don't get to steal my crown because you're too much of a coward to challenge me properly. Rothmore's pleasant expression hardened into something ugly. Then you've chosen death. What a waste. He moved faster than should be possible for a man his age, magical energy crackling around his hands in arcs of sickly green light. Theron shoved me aside hard enough that I stumbled, taking the blast meant for me square in the chest. The sound he made, part grunt, part scream, cut through me like a physical blow. He crashed into the garden wall with a sickening crack of breaking stone and possibly breaking bone, and the mate bond exploded with his pain, his shock, his wolf howling in rage at being hurt. No! The word tore out of me as a scream, my magic responding with such violence that the entire garden shook. Silver light exploded outward in a wave of pure fury, but Rothmore was ready, shield spells deflecting my power like water off glass. We dueled across the garden in a storm of light and lightning, destroying the careful sanctuary my mother had built, tearing up earth and stone, and the moonflowers Theron had planted for me. Rothmore was good. Decades of practice showed in every perfectly executed spell, every shield timed to the heartbeat, every attack calculated to exploit the opening my rage created. But I was stronger. Raw power sang in my veins, and I let it loose without the restraint I'd practiced for 8 years. Lightning cracked from my hands. The earth heaved at my command. Wind howled through the garden carrying razor-sharp leaves that slashed at Rothmore's shields, and all the while, I felt Theron through the bond, his pain, his struggle to stay conscious, his desperate attempt to get to his feet, despite broken ribs that ground together with every breath. That distraction cost me. Rothmore's spell caught me mid-attack, not damaging but binding, silver chains materializing around my wrists and throat. They burned cold against my skin, suppressing runes glowing along their length, cutting off my access to magic like severing a limb. "Fool," Rothmore hissed, stepping close enough that I could smell old books and older magic on him. "Did you think love would make you stronger? It's made you weak, distracted, vulnerable. You're so worried about your pet guard that you can't even focus on saving yourself." Through the mate bond, I felt Theron forcing himself to his feet, despite the broken ribs, despite the blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. Felt him reaching for his sword with shaking hands, ready to fight even though he could barely stand. And I realized Rothmore was wrong. Love hadn't made me weak. It had made me absolutely ruthless. I stopped fighting the chains, let my body sag as if defeated, as if all the fight had gone out of me. Rothmore stepped closer, triumph written across his face, already savoring his victory. And that's when I struck, not with the elemental magic he was expecting, not with anything I'd used during our battle. I reached for the death curse my mother had made me swear I'd never use, the forbidden magic that extracted a terrible price from the caster, but never ever failed to hit its target. The words came from somewhere deeper than conscious thought, syllables in a language dead before Rome fell, sounds that tasted like copper and ash and absolute certainty. Black light, not the absence of light, but light that was somehow dark, poured from me despite the binding chains, wrapping around Rothmore like a shroud. He screamed, not in pain, but in sudden, absolute terror, as he realized what I'd done. The spell left me gasping, blood dripping from my nose where vessels had burst from the strain. My magic reserves plummeted, draining faster than they ever had before. But Rothmore was on his knees now, clutching his chest, his own magic turning inward, devouring him from the inside out. "You," he choked on blood. "You can't." "I just did." My voice came out cold, empty of anything except iron will. "And now you're going to tell me everything. Who else is part of the coup? What you're really after, and where my husband's body is buried." Because I knew now, with sudden terrible certainty, that Aldrich's disappearance had never been mysterious. It had been murder. The death curse forced truth from Rothmore's lips, as payment for whatever time he had left to live, and what he told us made my blood run cold. The coup was so much bigger than I'd imagined. The counselors weren't just planning to take my throne. They'd been running a blood magic operation for over a century, extracting power from captive magical beings to create longevity elixirs. That's why Lord Castellan, who should have died 30 years ago, still looked barely 60. That's why Lady Ashbourne seemed to have stopped aging altogether. And Aldrich? He'd discovered their operation 8 months into our marriage, investigating strange magical signatures in the old wing of the castle. When he'd seen what they were doing, the creatures they kept imprisoned, the essence they harvested, he'd tried to shut it down, so they'd fed him to the dragon. "What dragon?" I demanded, crouching beside Rothmore even though my vision was going gray at the edges from magical exhaustion. His laugh was broken, bitter, blood bubbling at the corners of his mouth. "The dragon, Princess Seraphina of the Northern Realm. She's been trapped in the old tower for 135 years, and every month we extract her essence to fuel our immortality. Your husband was just one more meal to keep her obedient, one more body to throw into the darkness. He died before he could say more, the death curse claiming its final price. His body collapsed like a puppet with cut strings, and I felt nothing. No regret, no triumph, just bone-deep exhaustion, and the beginning of understanding about just how deep the rot in my kingdom went. Theron staggered to my side, his face pale with pain, but his arms steady as he wrapped them around me from behind. "We need to run," he said quietly, urgently, "right now, before they realize Rothmore is dead. Take horses and disappear." I leaned back against his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the mate bond. Strong, steady, still here despite everything. "No," I said, and my voice was steady, certain. "No running, not anymore." Because now I knew where the real monsters were hiding. And more importantly, I knew I had the one thing that could give me the courage to face them. I had love that was worth burning the world down to protect. I'd spent 8 years being careful, being quiet, being less than what I was, so that others would feel comfortable with my power. But the moment they took him from me, careful died. What remained was the witch queen my ancestors had always meant me to be. We burned Rothmore's body in the garden using witch fire, the kind that leaves no trace, no ash, nothing but scorched earth that would look like natural blight come morning. By the time the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, I'd crafted a story. Lord Rothmore had died of heart failure in his chambers, tragic and unexpected, another casualty of age that no amount of stolen magic could ultimately prevent. The counselors would suspect, but they couldn't prove anything. Not without admitting they knew about the blood magic operation, the dragon, the century of murder. I tended to Theron's injuries myself, kneeling beside him in the ruined garden, while my hands glowed with healing magic. I wove the power into his broken ribs, watching bruises fade from his olive skin, like storm clouds clearing, feeling the bones knit back together under my palms. He caught my hand when I was done, pressing a kiss to the inside of my wrist where my pulse still hammered with residual fear and rage. "You used a death curse," he said quietly, and there was something in his voice I couldn't quite name. Not judgment, but concern, fear for me, rather than of me. That kind of magic costs the user years of their life, decades. If the curse is strong enough, then I'll have to make every year count. I cupped his face, memorizing the planes of it. The silver scar above his eyebrow from taking an arrow meant for me, the strong line of his jaw, the way his storm gray eyes went soft when he looked at me like I was something precious instead of something dangerous. I won't lose you, Theron. Not to them, not to anything. I don't care what it costs me. The mate bond pulsed between us with his fierce pride, his terror, his love. The feeling is mutual, my queen. We had 3 days to prepare. 3 days where Theron gathered every scrap of information he could about the tower where Seraphina was imprisoned, its location in the abandoned East Wing, the guard rotations, the magical protections the Council had woven around it over the decades. 3 days where I studied every spell my mother had left in her grimoire, searching for something powerful enough to face both an ancient dragon and blood mages who'd had over a century to perfect their craft. And 3 days where we stole moments together whenever we could, in places where the counselor's eyes couldn't find us. We met in the library archives where dust covered forgotten books, and no one had ventured in years. Theron would stand behind me, ostensibly helping me reach high shelves, but really just being close. His presence a warm, solid comfort that kept the fear from drowning me. We'd steal kisses between ancient tomes, his hands sliding up my arms, my fingers threading through his dark hair, both of us breathing the same air for those precious stolen seconds. We met in the weapons room where he'd started teaching me knife work, showing me how to fight without magic because you never know when your power might fail you, and I won't have you defenseless. His hands would guide mine through the movements, correcting my grip, adjusting my stance, and every touch burned through the thin fabric of my training clothes until I couldn't tell if I was learning combat or just learning the geography of his body. And we met in my chambers after midnight, when the castle was quiet and the world narrowed to just us. Those were the hours I treasured most, when we could shed the roles we played during the day and just be Vivian and Theron, 2 people who'd found each other against impossible odds. We still hadn't made love, not completely, both of us too aware that we might not survive what was coming, too afraid that giving in to that final intimacy might somehow break us if one of us died. But we mapped each other's bodies with hands and mouths anyway, learning what made the other gasp, where the mate bond sang strongest, how our magic and wolves intertwined when we let down every barrier between us. "When this is over," Theron whispered against my throat on the second night, his hands tracing patterns on my bare skin that made me shiver. "I'm going to court you properly. Flowers and poetry and formal requests for your time. I'm going to make the council accept us, and then I'm going to marry you in front of the entire kingdom." I laughed, breathless, arching into his touch. "You realize I'm your queen? I could just command you to court me, command you to marry me. Where's the fun in that?" He kissed the hollow of my collarbone, that spot where the mate mark would go someday, the place that made my wolf howl with need. "Besides, I want to do this right. Want everyone to know you're mine and I'm yours. No more hiding. No more pretending you're just my queen and I'm just your guard." The fantasy was beautiful and dangerous, and everything I'd never let myself want. A life where I could be both witch and queen openly. A love that didn't have to hide in shadows. A future where the crown didn't mean loneliness. "Promise me," I said fiercely, pulling him closer. "Promise me we'll have that. That this isn't just a beautiful dream we're going to die chasing." "I promise," he said, and the mate bond carried the weight of that vow, making it more than words, making it truth. But on the third night, as Theron was leaving my chambers, we made a critical mistake. We kissed goodbye in the corridor. It was late, well past 3 a.m, and the castle felt dead silent around us. We thought we were safe, thought everyone was asleep, thought we could steal just one more moment before he had to return to the guards' quarters. One perfect kiss, his hand cupped around my face, my fingers threaded through his dark hair, both of us reluctant to separate when all we wanted was to stay tangled together. We didn't notice Lord Castellan watching from the shadows at the end of the hallway. Morning brought disaster. I was in a council meeting, discussing trade routes with the few counselors I actually trusted, when the throne room doors burst open. Guards stormed in, dragging a bloodied Theron between them, and my world tilted sideways. He'd been beaten, badly. His left eye was swollen completely shut, blood crusted over a split in his lip, fresh bruises layering over the ones I'd healed just days ago. His guard uniform was torn, and he moved like his ribs hurt, like every breath was agony. My wolf howled in rage. Magic surged inside me so violently that frost spread across the council table, climbing up the wood like living ice. I barely managed to keep it from exploding outward and revealing exactly what I was. What is the meaning of this? The words came out cold enough to freeze blood, every syllable edged with the promise of violence. Lord Castellan stood, and his expression was theatrical concern, the kind that made me want to claw his face off. Your Majesty, it pains me to bring such troubling news, but Captain Grayson has been arrested for treason. On what evidence? I kept my voice level through sheer force of will, even though the mate bond was screaming with Theron's pain, with his fear not for himself, but for me. He was discovered in the old tower attempting to free the creature imprisoned there. Castellan's eyes glittered with malice barely concealed behind false sorrow. The very beast that claimed King Aldric's life. One must wonder why your most trusted guard would commit such an act. Unless, perhaps, he's been compromised. Enchanted even, by forces that wish this kingdom harm. The trap was beautifully laid, elegant in its cruelty. They couldn't directly accuse me of being a witch without proof, but they could execute Theron for treason, could break the mate bond, and destroy me in the process. And if I tried to defend him too vigorously, if I revealed how much I cared, I'd expose the very relationship that proved their accusations of enchantment. Through the mate bond, I felt Theron's silent, desperate plea. Don't risk yourself for me. Let me go. Save yourself, like hell. Captain Grayson has served this kingdom faithfully for a decade, I said, and my voice could have cut diamonds. I will not have him condemned on accusations alone. Present your evidence. The evidence is at the tower, Lady Ashbourne interjected smoothly, her snake eyes watching me for any sign of weakness. Where the captain was apprehended attempting his treasonous act. Perhaps your Majesty would like to inspect the scene of the crime personally? It was bait, and we all knew it. The tower was where they kept Seraphina, where they'd been extracting dragon essence for over a century, where they controlled every magical protection and could kill me the moment I walked through the doors. They were daring me to walk into their stronghold, to put myself in their power, betting that I cared enough about Theron to be stupid. They were right. I met Theron's one good eye across the throne room, saw the fear there, not for himself, but for me, felt through the bond his desperate wish that I'd abandon him, that I'd choose my own survival over his life, that I'd be smart instead of in love. I smiled, cold and sharp as a blade. Then let's not waste time. Prepare my guard. We leave within the hour. They didn't take Theron to the tower immediately. He was to be held for questioning, while I inspected the evidence, which gave me exactly one chance to see him before everything went to hell. I used a concealment spell to sneak into the dungeon cells, burning through precious magic I couldn't afford to waste, but couldn't afford not to use. The guards outside never saw me slip past, never felt the whisper of power that made me invisible to mortal eyes. Theron was chained to the wall in the deepest cell, the one usually reserved for the worst traitors and murderers. The sight of him like that, bound, bleeding, caged, made something primal and violent rise up in my chest. I wanted to burn the entire castle down, wanted to kill everyone who'd touched him, wanted to shift into my wolf form and tear out throats until no one was left standing. Instead, I worked the lock with a whispered spell, slipping inside the cell and closing the door behind me. Theron, he lunged forward despite the chains, despite his injuries, capturing my mouth in a kiss that tasted like blood and desperation and goodbye. You shouldn't be here, he gasped between kisses, his hands coming up to cut my face even though the chains yanked at his wrists. "Vivian, please, you need to run. They know about us. They've been watching us this whole time. This entire thing is a trap, designed to force you to the tower where they can kill you." "I know." I rested my forehead against his, breathing him in, memorizing the scent of pine and steel and him. "I'm going anyway." "No." He said it with all the command a beta could muster against an alpha, knowing it wouldn't work but trying anyway, desperate and fierce. "I'm not worth your life. I'm not worth your kingdom. Let me go. You're worth everything." I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, needing him to see the truth in mine. "You're my mate, Theron. My heart. The first person in 8 years who made me want to be myself, instead of just the crown I wear. You made me remember what it feels like to be human, to be a woman, to want something beyond mere survival. Do you really think I'm going to let them take you from me?" I unlocked his chains with another spell, and the moment his hands were free, we fell into each other with the desperate urgency of people who know this might be the last time. There, in that cold dungeon cell that smelled of stone and despair, with danger closing in from all sides and time running out like sand through an hourglass, we finally let the mate bond take us completely. There was nothing gentle about it. We came together like a storm meeting the shore, all hunger and need, and the howling grief of potential goodbye. I poured my magic into him through the bond, healing his injuries properly this time, erasing the bruises and cuts until his skin was unmarked. He held me like I was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth, his hands mapping my body with desperate reverence, whispering my name like a prayer, like a promise, like everything he couldn't put into words. When we finally broke apart, both breathless and shaking, the mate bond was different, stronger, complete in a way it hadn't been before, sealed not just by touch, but by the absolute certainty that we would die for each other if it came to that. "If something happens to me," I started. "No, listen." I cupped his face, forcing him to meet my eyes. "If I don't make it back, I need you to do something for me. In my chambers, there's a grimoire hidden in the false bottom of my jewelry box. It has a spell that will contact the witch covens in the south. Tell them what the council has been doing. Tell them about Seraphina, about the blood magic, about everything. They'll come for justice. Promise me." His eyes were bright with unshed tears, but his voice was steady. "I promise, but you're going to make it back. We both are. And then we're going to end this nightmare and build something better." I kissed him one more time, slow and deep, trying to pour 8 years of loneliness and 3 days of stolen joy and a lifetime of love into a single moment. Then I slipped out of the cell, relocking it behind me with shaking hands, leaving half my heart chained in darkness while I walked toward the tower and whatever nightmare waited inside. The ride to the tower took 2 hours. I sat straight-backed on my white mare, surrounded by guards whose loyalty belonged to Castellan rather than their queen, with the counselors riding behind me like ravens following a soon-to-be corpse. They thought they'd won. Thought I'd walk into their trap like a fool blinded by love, too emotional to think clearly, too compromised to be the calculating queen they'd always feared. They were right that love brought me here, but they were catastrophically wrong about what it made me. Love hadn't made me weak. Love had made me realize I was done pretending to be smaller than I was, done hiding my power to make others comfortable with my existence, done playing by rules that were designed to keep me in chains. For 8 years I'd been so careful, so quiet, so determined not to make waves because I was terrified of the pyre. But they'd taken my mate. They'd beaten him, imprisoned him, used him as bait, because they thought his life was my weakness. They were about to learn it was my strength. When we reached the ancient tower, its black stones still bearing scorch marks from some long-ago war, Vivian dismounted with the grace of a queen and the cold fury of a witch who'd finally run out of mercy. "Show me this evidence," I commanded, and my voice could have frozen the sun. "Show me this creature that supposedly seduced my guard into treason." Lord Castellan smiled his snake smile, the one that showed too many teeth. "As your majesty wishes." He opened the tower door, and darkness spilled out like a living thing, thick and hungry and ancient. From deep within came a sound that was half roar and half scream, the cry of something that had been caged too long, that had gone mad from loneliness and rage and endless, endless hunger. I stepped inside without hesitation. Behind me, I heard the door slam shut, with a finality that echoed through my bones, heard the magical locks engage, felt the wards activate, cutting me off from the outside world. Castellan's laughter echoed through the stone, triumphant and cruel. "Goodbye, Your Majesty. Do send our regards to your husband when you see him in whatever afterlife awaits. Oh wait, there won't be anything left of either of you to recognize once the dragon's finished." I smiled in the darkness, letting my eyes shift to their wolf gold glow, letting my magic fill the cramped space with silver light that pushed back the shadows. From deep in my bodice, I pulled out the one thing I'd stolen from the castle armory before leaving, my mother's witchblade, forged in dragonfire and blessed by the moon goddess herself, the blade that had killed 100 enemies and never once failed her. "You made one critical mistake," I said to the darkness, to the dragon somewhere ahead, to the counselors listening on the other side of the door. "You thought I came here to die. You thought love made me desperate, reckless, weak." I started walking deeper into the tower, blade in one hand, magic crackling around the other, every step taking me closer to whatever waited in the dark. I came here to win, and when I'm done, the only ones dying today will be you. The dragon's roar answered my challenge, and the real battle began. My mother used to tell me that true power isn't about how much magic you can wield. It's about what you're willing to risk everything to protect. I'd never understood that lesson until the moment I stood in a dragon's prison, wearing my mother's armor of light and fury, ready to burn down the world to save my mate and my kingdom. The tower's interior was nothing like I expected. Instead of a cramped dungeon, it opened into a vast circular chamber that seemed to extend impossibly upward, the ceiling lost in shadows that might have been sky or might have been endless dark. Chains as thick as tree trunks hung from the walls, glowing with suppression runes that made my witch blood crawl, and coiled in the center of it all, easily 50 feet long from snout to tail, was the dragon. But this wasn't the mindless beast of legends, the monster that haunted children's nightmares. This creature had intelligence in those ancient amber eyes, intelligence and pain, and a rage that had been building for over a century of captivity. "Another sacrifice," the dragon said, and her voice was like stone grinding against stone, barely human, after so long in this form. "The counselors must be truly worried if they're feeding me their queen." I didn't lower my mother's blade, but I didn't attack either. "Seraphina of the Northern Realm?" The massive head swung toward me, surprise flickering in those amber eyes. "You know my name. Lord Rothmore told me before he died." I kept my voice steady, my magic ready, but contained. "He said you ate my husband." A long silence filled the tower, heavy with old grief. Then, "I did. I've eaten 43 people in this prison over 135 years. Your husband was number 37. Would you like to know what his last words were?" My heart clenched, but I forced myself to stay calm, to listen. "Yes," he said. "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her she deserves better than a king who was too weak to stop this." The dragon shifted, scales scraping against stone with a sound like swords being sharpened. He found this place by accident, investigating strange magical signatures in the old wing. When he saw what they were doing to me, the monthly harvesting, the essence extraction, the way they kept me hovering at the edge of starvation to keep me obedient, he tried to free me, so they threw him in here, knowing I hadn't eaten in weeks, knowing I'd be too mad with hunger to ask questions first, knowing I'd kill him before I realized he was trying to help. The grief was old and heavy, but I didn't let it drown me. Aldrich hadn't been my mate, but he'd been decent in his way, kind when the crown didn't demand cruelty. He'd deserved better than to die in darkness, fed to a monster by the very people he'd trusted to advise him. "I'm not here to die," I said quietly, meeting those ancient amber eyes without flinching. "And I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to free you." The dragon laughed, and it was bitter and broken, the sound of hope dying over and over across decades. "Impossible. These chains are bound with blood magic drawn from my own heart. Only the one who forged them can break them, and Lord Castellan isn't going to have a change of heart after 135 years of profiting from my captivity. Then I'll have to convince him." I sheathed my blade and approached the dragon, ignoring every instinct screaming at me to run, every childhood story warning me that dragons ate witches for breakfast. "But first, I need your help. My mate is in their custody. They're using him as bait to keep me here, to make sure I walk into this trap. If I don't return by sunset, they'll execute him. They'll kill the only person in this God's-forsaken kingdom who's ever truly seen me. And why should I care about your mate?" The dragon's voice was cautious, testing. "Why should I help the next in a long line of royals who've profited from my suffering? Because you were taken from someone you loved too." I spoke with the certainty of witch intuition, the knowing that came from blood and magic, and the way certain truths resonate in your bones. That's why you were in the South that day they captured you. You were meeting someone forbidden. The dragon's eyes flashed with pain so raw it made my chest ache. A witch prince from the Silverdale line. Your bloodline, little queen. We were going to run away together, build a life away from politics and duty and kingdoms that didn't want us. But my father's hunters found us first, killed him while I watched, transformed me as punishment for daring to love beneath my station, locked me here where I could do some good for the kingdom by being their magical battery for eternity. Silverdale, my ancestor, which meant Serafina wasn't just another victim of the council's greed. She was connected to my own bloodline, to the very magic flowing through my veins, to the family that had died trying to love her. Then help me, I said fiercely, magic crackling around my clenched fists. Help me stop them. Help me save my mate the way no one could save yours. And I swear on the moon goddess and every witch who came before me, I will find a way to break these chains and give you back your freedom, even if I have to tear Castellan's heart out with my bare hands to do it. For a long moment, the dragon just stared at me. Then something shifted in those amber eyes. Recognition, maybe, or respect, or just the desperate gamble of someone who'd been hopeless for so long that even the slimmest chance felt like salvation. What's your plan, little witch queen? It took time and power, but together we crafted something beautiful and terrible. I used my magic to amplify Serafina's voice, weaving acoustic spells that would carry her words through every stone of the castle, into every room and corridor, reaching every servant and guard and noble whether they wanted to hear or not. And Serafina told everything, every name, every crime, every person the council had fed to her over 135 years, speaking their names like a litany of the dead. She told about the blood magic operation, the longevity elixirs sold to the wealthy and corrupt, the magical creatures imprisoned and harvested throughout the kingdom. She told about King Aldrich, about his horror when he'd discovered what his trusted advisors had been doing, about how they'd murdered him and blamed his death on the very creature he'd tried to save. The magic carried her voice to every corner of Argent Vale, ensuring that every soul in the kingdom heard the truth. The tower doors burst open before she'd finished speaking. Castellan and his cohort stormed in, faces twisted with rage, magical energy crackling around their hands in colors that shouldn't exist in nature. Sickly greens and putrid yellows and blacks shot through with red, the signature of blood magic that had been practiced too long and gone too rotten. They'd expected to find my corpse. Instead, they found me standing beside the dragon, silver witch fire burning in my palms, my mother's blade strapped across my back, very much alive and absolutely done with their games. "You stupid girl," Castellan snarled, and all pretense of civility had burned away, leaving only the monster underneath. "Did you think exposing us would help? Half the kingdom is complicit in our operation. Who do you think buys the longevity elixirs? Who do you think pays us to keep this running? The nobles, the wealthy merchants, everyone with enough gold to afford a few more decades of life. You've just turned them all against you. Then half the kingdom is about to face justice." My voice was cold, empty of everything except certainty. "Starting with you. Where is Theron?" Lady Ashbourne laughed, high and cruel. "Dead by now, I imagine. We left him in the dungeon with a slow-acting poison in his water. He has maybe an hour left, if he's lucky. But don't worry. You'll be joining him soon enough. We'll bury you together, the Witch Queen and her enchanted guard dog." How romantic. The mate bond screamed in my chest, confirming the poison's presence. I could feel Theron weakening even now, his wolf struggling against toxin burning through his veins, his body fighting a losing battle against something specifically designed to kill shifters from the inside out. 1 hour, maybe less. The counselors attacked as one, blood magic and combat spells creating a maelstrom of destructive power that would have leveled any normal building. They were old, experienced, completely ruthless, and backed by over a century of forbidden knowledge. But I had something they didn't. I had righteous fury. I had the power of an alpha witch queen who'd finally stopped holding back, and I had a dragon on my side. Serafina couldn't break her chains, couldn't move more than a few feet from her anchor point, but she could breathe fire hot enough to melt stone. She could create barriers with her massive wings, buying me time to cast without getting hit by the barrage of spells. And most importantly, she could tell me exactly where the blood magic anchors were hidden, the focal points throughout the tower that kept the whole operation powered. that fed magic into the chains, that maintained the spells preserving Castellan and his cohort past their natural lifespans. The battle was brutal. I took a blast of dark magic to my shoulder that burned like acid being poured directly into my veins, the pain so intense my vision went white for a moment. But I responded with the lightning strike my mother had taught me, the one that never missed its target, that tracked its prey through shields and around corners, that struck with the force of heaven's judgment. Castellan went down screaming, his blood magic shields shattering under the assault, his body convulsing as electricity coursed through him. But he didn't die. Blood mages were harder to kill than normal people, their stolen magic sustaining them past what should be fatal injuries. Lady Ashbourne tried to run. Seraphina's tail blocked the exit with a crash that shook the tower, and I hit her with binding magic, freezing her in place like a fly in amber. One by one, the corrupt counselors fell. Some died. Some I captured, wrapped in spells that would hold them until I could execute them properly, publicly, as a warning to anyone else who thought they could prey on the innocent and call it governance. But I didn't have time to savor victory. Through the mate bond, I felt Theron's heartbeat growing fainter, his wolf whining in pain and fear, his consciousness starting to slip. "Go," Seraphina said, understanding without me having to explain. "I'll keep the survivors contained. Save your mate." I ran. I shifted into my wolf form mid-run, something I'd never dared do in the castle before, letting my alpha power flow freely for the first time in 8 years. Guards scattered from my path. Servants screamed. I didn't care who saw, didn't care about maintaining the facade, didn't care about anything except reaching Theron before the poison stole him from me forever. I found him in the dungeon cell, collapsed against the wall, lips blue, breathing so shallow I could barely see his chest move. The mate bond was a knife in my chest, his pain echoing through me until I could barely stand under the weight of it. "No," I breathed, shifting back to human form, gathering him into my arms. "No, you don't get to leave me. Not now. Not when we just found each other. Not when we haven't had our life yet." I tried every healing spell I knew, pouring power into him until my reserves started to falter, until my vision went gray at the edges. But poison this advanced needed specific anti-venom, something to counteract the particular toxin they'd used. And I didn't know what it was, didn't have time to identify it, didn't have the resources to brew a cure even if I did. "Vivian." His voice was barely a whisper, so faint I almost missed it. "My queen, my mate, I love you. Don't." Tears streamed down my face, hot and bitter. "Don't you dare say goodbye. I won't accept it. I refuse." Through the bond I felt his wolf fading, the light dimming like a candle guttering out. And in that moment of absolute desperation, watching the only person I'd ever truly loved die in my arms, I made a choice that would change both our lives forever. I bit down on my own wrist, hard enough to draw blood, then pressed it to his mouth. "Drink." "What?" He tried to resist, but he was too weak. "Witch blood," I said fiercely, desperately. "Ancient magic passed down through generations, condensed in the blood of my line. Drink, damn you. Let my power save you even if my spells can't." He drank, because he was dying and had no choice, because some part of him trusted me even in this, and the effect was immediate. My magic flooded into him through the blood, through the mate bond, through sheer force of will and love, and absolute refusal to let death have him. It burned through his system like liquid silver, seeking out the poison, neutralizing it cell by cell, rewriting his biology on a fundamental level to accept the magic instead of rejecting it. But there was a price. There's always a price with this kind of magic, with this level of transformation. When Theron's eyes opened, they were different. Still storm gray, but now shot through with flecks of silver that caught the light, a touch of witch sight mixed with wolf instinct. He sat up slowly, staring at his hands where faint magical marks now glowed beneath the skin, intricate patterns that matched mine, that marked him as something new. "What did you do?" His voice was steady, but full of wonder and confusion, and something that might have been fear. "I made you like me." My voice shook, terror and relief warring in my chest. Part witch, part wolf. I didn't have permission. I didn't ask. I just couldn't let you die. I couldn't. A sob caught in my throat. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If you hate me for this, if you can never forgive me for changing you without consent." He pulled me into his arms and kissed me hard enough to bruise, deep enough to claim. with all the passion of a man who'd just come back from death and found the love of his life waiting on the other side. "Thank you," he whispered fiercely against my lips, his hands cupping my face like I was something infinitely precious. "Thank you for not letting go. Thank you for being selfish enough to keep me. Thank you for loving me more than you loved following the rules." We stayed like that for a long moment, both of us crying, both of us laughing, both of us alive against all odds. Then we stood together, hand in hand, and walked out of that dungeon to finish what we'd started. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind that barely left me time to breathe, executing the surviving corrupt counselors, publicly, in the town square, so everyone could see that justice had teeth, exposing the full extent of the longevity elixir operation, tracking down everyone who'd bought their extended lives with innocent blood, making them answer for their crimes, dismantling the blood magic networks that had spread through every level of government and commerce, forming a new council of advisors I could actually trust, people who'd been locked out of power precisely because they couldn't be bought or corrupted, who saw service as a duty rather than an opportunity to profit, and sending out a call to every white witch in the kingdom. Come to Argent Vale. Come into the light. We have work to do, and you don't have to hide anymore. Today, 2 weeks after the battle in the tower, I stood before the largest gathering the throne room had ever held. Every noble who wasn't in chains, every merchant and guildmaster, every common citizen who could fit had crammed inside to witness history being made. I wore my mother's ceremonial armor, not the formal gown that would have been traditional, the armor she'd worn as a young witch defending her coven, before she'd fallen in love with my father and tried to be something she wasn't, before the hiding had cost her everything. The witch marks on my arms glowed openly through the enchanted silver, visible to everyone, undeniable proof of what I was. Beside me, Theron wore the formal dress uniform of the royal consort, a title we'd had to create because there was no precedent for an alpha queen taking a beta mate who was also now a witchguard hybrid, something entirely new in the kingdom's 1,000-year history. "People of Argent Vale," I said, my voice magically amplified to reach every corner of the throne room and beyond, carrying into the streets where more citizens gathered. For 8 years, I hid what I was. I ruled you as half a person, showing you the crown but hiding the magic, because I feared your judgment. I feared the fire. I feared being less than the queen you needed. So I tried to be more than the witch I was born to be. I took Theron's hand, letting the mate bond glow visibly between us, silver light pulsing with our joined heartbeats. But I've learned that true strength isn't about hiding your power to make others comfortable. It's about using every gift you have to protect those who can't protect themselves. It's about choosing love, even when the world calls it impossible. It's about being exactly who you were meant to be. Consequences be damned, because anything less is a lie, and we've all lived with enough lies. I raised our joined hands high. I'm a witch, an alpha, a queen, and this man, this brave, loyal, impossible man, is my mate. Not because tradition demanded it, not because politics required it, but because our souls chose each other across every barrier that should have kept us apart. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with my new council, or better yet, with him. The crowd was silent for a heartbeat that stretched like eternity. Then someone started clapping, then another. Then the whole throne room erupted in applause, because I'd been a good queen despite everything, because people were starving for honesty after decades of lies, because they were ready for change and hope, and a ruler who didn't pretend to be something she wasn't just to keep a crown. Later that evening, we gathered in the courtyard, hundreds of white witches who'd been hiding for generations, now standing openly in the twilight, their power making the air shimmer with possibility. They formed a circle around the tower where Seraphina still waited, preparing for the most ambitious spell I'd ever attempted. I stood at the center, Theron at my side, both of us channeling our combined magic into the working. The witches joined hands, pooling their power, weaving it together under the rising full moon, until the magic built and built, silver light growing bright enough to turn night into day. When we released it, the spell struck Seraphina's chains like a hammer forged from starlight and will, and the combined fury of every witch who'd ever been caged for being what they were. The blood magic shattered, the suppression runes cracked and went dark. The transformation magic that had held her for 135 years, finally broke. Where once had been a dragon, now knelt a woman with silver hair that fell to her waist, and amber eyes that sparkled with tears. She was sobbing, great heaving sobs of relief and grief and overwhelming joy, and I rushed forward to catch her before she collapsed. "Welcome back, princess," I said softly, helping her stand on legs that hadn't been human in over a century. Serafina looked at me, at Theron, at the hundreds of witches gathered in solidarity around us. "Your ancestor promised he'd come back for me," she said, her voice rusty from disuse but growing stronger. "He never could. But you," her voice broke, "you finished what he started. You gave me back my life. Thank you doesn't begin to cover it, but thank you." 6 months later, I walked through the gardens in the twilight, moonflowers glowing softly around us like earthbound stars. Theron was at my side, our fingers laced together, both of us wearing simple clothes instead of royal finery, because sometimes you just needed to be two people in love instead of queen and consort. Argent Vale had changed in ways I'd barely dared dream possible. Witches served openly on the council. Their magic used to improve infrastructure, heal the sick, protect borders. The practice of burning accused women had been abolished, replaced with actual investigations and fair trials. Schools for magical education had opened in every major city, teaching children that power was a gift to be cultivated, not a curse to be hidden. And I'd married Theron in a ceremony that combined traditional royal protocol with ancient witch bonding rituals, creating something entirely new, forging a path for others who'd been told their love was impossible. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked quietly, the question that haunted me in quiet moments. "Becoming this? Giving up your normal life?" Theron stopped walking, turning to face me, cupping my face with hands that now glowed with faint magical marks. "I gave up nothing and gained everything. You're my mate, my queen, my partner in ruling this kingdom and making it better than it was. How could I possibly regret that?" I leaned into his touch, letting the mate bond sing between us. "Even though I can't give you children, it was the one shadow on our happiness. The death curse, the massive healing spell for Serafina, the sheer amount of magic I'd poured out in those weeks had left me infertile. My body could no longer sustain a pregnancy, couldn't create life when it had spent so much power saving and changing it. I'd discovered it 2 months ago, and even though Theron insisted it didn't matter, I'd seen the way he watched children in the marketplace, the wistful expression he tried to hide. "Even though," he said firmly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth through the bond. "Vivian, we have options. Adoption. Maybe your magic will heal enough over time to change things. Maybe it won't. Either way, I chose you. Just you. Everything else is extra." The mate bond pulsed with his absolute sincerity, washing away the guilt I'd been carrying. "Besides," he added with a grin that made him look years younger, "Serafina has decided to stay in Argent Vale as the Northern Ambassador. She's basically our extremely deadly, occasionally dragon-shaped daughter figure. Does that count?" I laughed, the sound bright and free in the garden air. "Only you would adopt a 150-year-old dragon princess and call her family," says the witch queen who married her witch-hunting guard's son. He kissed me softly, thoroughly. "We're not exactly traditional, are we?" "No," I agreed, wrapping my arms around him, feeling our wolves settle together contentedly. "We're something better." We stood there as the moon rose higher, two people who were never supposed to fall in love, who'd broken every rule and survived every obstacle, who'd rebuilt a kingdom together and made it better than it was before. Two people who'd proven that sometimes the most powerful magic isn't what you're born with, it's what you're willing to fight for. When Theron whispered, "I love you," against my hair, I responded with the words that had become our private vow, the promise we renewed every day, "Forever and always, my heart, in this life and every life to come." The moonflowers bloomed brighter around us, blessed by witch magic and mate bond magic, and the simple magic of two people choosing each other against all odds. And the kingdom of Argent Vale, for the first time in its long history, was ruled by a queen who wore both her crowns openly, the gold one that glittered in sunlight, and the silver one that glowed beneath the moon. I'd spent 8 years hiding, 8 years being less than I was, 8 years afraid of the fire. But I'd learned that the fire only has power when you're alone, when you have someone willing to stand beside you in the flames, willing to burn with you rather than watch you burn alone. That's when you discover what you're really made of. I was made of starlight and steel, witch fire and wolf fury, love and power woven together until they were indistinguishable. I was Vivian Silverdale, witch queen of Argent Vale, and I wore both my crowns with pride. And I was finally blessedly completely free.